Something I'm very concerned with, not only for myself, but even for all the CTOs, technical leaders listening to this, is our general stress levels that we live with, which is the stress that kills. It's the stress that leads us to unhealthy habits. It's the stress that puts work first beyond anything. Can I have a why that says I want to reduce my stress levels?
It is a finite goal, and it is also a finite goal that's attached to a negative. It's a finite goal that's about eliminating something I don't want rather than a goal that's sustainable and scalable attached to something I do want. So the why needs to be attached to something that I want that's an experience of my life, not just an experience at work between 9 to 5, not just about eliminating the stress around that work. I think it has to be something that we connect to something that matters to us. I want to see, I want to sort of live a healthy, long life, not just survive longer and stay alive longer, but I actually want to have an experience of feeling good. Or I want to be somebody who loves what I do and wants to continue doing that for the long haul.
From 7 CTOs, my name is Etienne de Bruin, and you're in the CTO studio.
Hi, all. Welcome to the CTO podcast. I'm Brittany Cotton, the head of coaching and facilitation at 7 CTOs. I am joined today by Etienne de Bruin, our founder, and Mark Hunter, a coach and leader who we have had on the podcast before. So if you recognize his name, you're not crazy. You have listened to him. And Mark, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me back.
You are welcome.
Wow.
You are someone who I know in the world is up to a lot. You are a leader at accomplishment coaching, training and supporting folks in building coaching businesses and working on their leadership. You've written a book, you're working on another book. You are engaged and in process of integrating yourself into fatherhood. You work with tons of different companies and you're super committed to your well-being and really taking care of yourself and getting your needs met. And being that that's the topic of this podcast, can you start there? Like, actually, how do you create it all and manage to hold your well-being as so paramount to having that all work?
I think the short answer to how is that I learned the hard way about what happens if I don't put my well-being first and foundational. So I had a lot of breakdowns, just not enough energy, not enough access to possibility and sort of insight and innovation because I wasn't modeling sort of that high level of self that was commensurate with the high level of work and innovation that I was expecting of myself. And that disparity exposed itself in a lot of different ways in the work I was producing, my energy level, my ability to partner powerfully, especially in dynamic and challenging environments and situations. And so it was a breakdown that I learned a lot from. That's sort of how came to be. But I'll be honest with you, the thing that I learned most from that breakdown was that it doesn't work to sort of have a well-being routine or structure or strategy. Didn't work for me. What I've found works most sustainably and scalably for folks is a shift in lifestyle, like actually a lifestyle shift that includes well-being as a foundation.
And what do you mean by that? I could take lifestyle as so many different down so many different avenues. So when you say it, what's the picture you're actually painting for us?
Yeah. That it's a non-negotiable, that it's actually part of who we are. It's not something we do. It's not an activity. It's not a membership to a gym or something like that. It doesn't mean that it's a mindset. It's actually something that we embody. And it means, and well-being means so many things as well, right? So it doesn't mean any one thing, but that sort of when you embody well-being as a lifestyle or as a way of being, then you start to access curiosity and innovative ways to generate new ways of taking care of yourself and it actually starts to get creative. It starts to become a game. How can I take better care of myself? How can I, how can I do all the things I'm doing and include and weave well-being into those things?
I feel feel like you're saying something so simple, but that there is just a weight around what you're saying. For instance, saying it's not, it's not about the things you do, but it's about a lifestyle. Ha- I feel like you 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 went through so much to get to such a simple explanation of it that it might leave listeners and myself a little like hang on. What do you well, where do I begin with the one and where does the other one end? I mean, if I think, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start a lifestyle of meditation, why did I say meditation, and where do I start, but what does that mean? Like
Yeah.
help me unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question. And thanks for backing it up because I think it does have to start with that question you mentioned. Why? Why well-being at all? Why are we even having this conversation about well-being? Why am I considering it? Why am I watching people talk about it? What's the thing about it that's a draw? I think that answer is intimate, personal, and different for every person. But I think that answer to the question why is sort of that seminal start point for what to do from there. So, if why, for example, is to solve an acute problem or challenge. For example, it's because I have to get through tax season, or if it's because I have to get through the end of Q3 or whatever you call it in terms of what your sort of, if it becomes a thing that you have to do for a finite reason to fix a problem, then it tends to lend itself to creating finite solutions that don't last much longer than the problem does. So if we attach the why
Mm,
to a specific finite period of time, then the why becomes finite as well, I think just by nature. So I think first we have to create a why and answer that question that's beyond fixing a problem. And then also has to be beyond a specific time frame. Like I just want to
mm,
be well or take care of myself through this specific period of time. Fitting into the wedding dress, being able to get to a certain weight. These things tend to have people get there and then stop because
yes.
there was no vision beyond that.
Now, can I? So that's interesting. Can I ask? Let's say, for instance, I want to, something I'm very concerned with, not only for myself, but even for all the CTOs, technical leaders listening to this, is our general stress levels that we live with, which is the stress that kills. It's the stress that leads us to unhealthy habits. It's the stress that puts work first beyond anything. Can I have a why that says I want to reduce my stress levels? And isn't that a finite goal as well?
It is a finite goal, and it is also a finite goal that's attached to a negative. It's a finite goal that's about eliminating something I don't want rather than a goal that's sustainable and scalable attached to something I do want. So I think the why needs to be attached to something that I want that's an experience of my life, not just an experience at work between 9 to 5, not just about eliminating the stress around that work. I think it has to be something that we connect to something that matters to us. I want to see, I want to sort of live a healthy, long life, not just survive longer and stay alive longer, but I actually want to have an experience of feeling good. Or I want to be somebody who loves what I do and wants to continue doing that for the long haul. I want to watch my kids and my grandkids grow up. Things like that are sort of a very time horizon and are also inclusive of the experience we want to have along the way, not just getting there, and then dropping dead.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Sorry, Brett. I'm just getting coached right now. Um, so for instance, I have a why that I'm calling sort of my prime directive right now, and that is, to get my health back. I'm saying, okay, I want to get my health back to. I've given it away in service of startups, entrepreneurship, money, household income, family, and I'm at a place now where I've gotten enough vital signs back where I'm like, okay, shit, I have to actually look at this. And the way I'm listening to you now is I'm thinking, okay, hang on, I might have a bit of a finite why, because I'm getting my health back. Is, well, what happens when I get it back, and what for do this kind of situation. So is there, but what I do get from such a finite goal is action and do, and like I can measure, I am, and so what are you hearing when I say all of that?
I think you're spot on the things you pointed to. There, it is a bit of a finite goal, and it does fix the problem. It fixes the problem of what you gave up in your words for success, for monetary success. It also is finite in that I got to get my health back. So once I get it back, the question is then what? So the why needs to be bigger than that, like an experience you want to have, for example,
Mm,
and it doesn't have to be anything, I don't mean to have this sound mysterious, and I'm not intending to be right about any of this either. This is just what I've seen work over a long period of time. It's worked for me. I've
mm,
seen it work for people who practiced it is to take the reason out of a thing that we're doing or that we're up to and have it be something that we want for ourselves, sort of like giving ourselves this. I think one of
mm,
the challenges with well-being is that it's sort of related to as an extra thing to do. Like, so it takes up time, it takes up resources, it's in the way. It's the equivalent though of saying that sleep is, is in the way. It takes up time, it takes up, resources, it's in the way. You don't sleep so as to get to a certain place. You do it because it's part of what you need in order to function effectively. I sort of
mm,
think about well-being in the same way. So if you're talking about stress specifically as a CTO or as an executive or as a person living life in today's fast-paced day and age, stress is a symptom of something. So stress isn't the only thing to address. It's sort of what's that coming from. And the
mm,
reason I said mindset earlier is because there are people who are very busy. They get lots of things done and they're active all the time, but they aren't overwhelmed. They aren't stressed necessarily.
mm,
Those things are in some ways are experiences that people have or feelings that people have around the things that they've chosen. So there are ways to address stress and overwhelm that aren't just about meditating or exercising or things like those are important component parts. But there's also an associated mindset shift that can make a big difference too around why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why am I doing the thing that is the source of my stress? Why am I doing this thing that's taking up so much of my time? For example, you might go all the way back and take a look at what had you do all that work to get all that monetary success. Take a look there. Back at the beginning of that, there's some inception points
mm,
that had you decide that thing has to happen first. I have to put everything behind the financial success, the career success. What's that thing? Because that thing is
mm,
going to tell you a lot about why you would go and create well-being as as a way of life, right? As a lifestyle, as a mindset, and as something that you do because it's simply a part of who you are.
hmm,
The thing I haven't heard said, but that it occurs we're pointing to or saying inadvertently is like when I hear you say this lifestyle or this mindset around well being, to me, it's really ownership of the self and the self's importance. Like actually saying, hey, I am really important. And so for me to be deeply taken care of is of a priority such that I can do all the things I want to do, create all the things I want to create, be who I want to be, so on and so forth. So when I hear a lifestyle, it occurs like the lifestyle is saying, hey, I am significant. And in order to stay at the level of significance and the level of effectiveness, I actually need to take care of myself.
Yeah, Brady, you might be pointing to something that's even behind some of the layers I'm pointing to, right? Because
Mhm.
what I'm talking about is simply wanting to have an experience of wellness.
Right.
So I can go out there and do all the things I want to do, but I can also have the experience of feeling well around them while I'm doing them too, right? I'm not sort of suffering them. I'm not surviving the things I'm up to. This isn't just work. This is family. This
Right.
is, living your life. Like a lot of people just sort of survive those things, unfortunately. And well-being and all the aspects of well-being. By the way, well-being means spending time with loved ones, having community. It means, for some people, it means reading. For some people, it means quiet time. For some folks, it means exercise. For some folks, it means spending time with the kids watching TV. These things are all aspects of well-being. There's no one definition, but these things become, if we make a lifestyle out of them,
Mhm.
then it creates our experience of our life as something we've chosen. It's an intentional experience of our life. We're not trying to just get through it. We
Yeah.
are now interweaving all these well-being aspects that chosen into the fabric of what we're up to.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what you're pointing to. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I'm inferring from the conversation is that the desire and vision to have it be a lifestyle likely would come from a acknowledgement that I am important and there are things
Mm.
I need to actually serve myself to the world. Like,
Yes.
right, to get me to that cup being full.
Absolutely. I totally agree with
And I see it all the time in CTOs and other folks in the C-suite and all the other people walking on the planet. Is it occurs like well-being is one of the first things that gets put on the back burner,
you. Yeah.
right? And it's an interesting concept if we look at a full relationship with well-being being representative of saying, "I care and I matter," how quickly it goes out the window when other things show up.
Yep. Yeah. I see it all the time too. And I think that a lot of what is behind that, and this is not, again, it's no study that I've created, but I've talked to a lot of people who do this, including myself. And it's very easy to quit on me. It's much easier for me to quit on me than it is for me to quit on you or our team or our corporate goal or the visible things out there in the world we're creating. We're egoic beings, right? And we're tribal, connected, relational beings as well. If I'm in a team with you or at work, I will quit on myself if I'm alone much quicker than I'll quit on us, typically. And that's because I don't want to be seen as quitting on you. But in the privacy of my own home or my well-being, which people don't necessarily see the effects of immediately, it's easier to drop that out because, well, nobody sees that I can deal with it on my own and it only affects me and it's not going to be in any way anything I can be shamed about, at least immediately. And so I can get away with it. I'm thinking about getting away with it. What can I get away with? But this is part of that mindset that I talk about. This is why I think it's such a mindset. Because if we are in a mindset of what can I get away with so as to survive the next day or survive the next quarter or the next project deadline or whatever, then we get into that mindset and we start to lop off the things that serve us the most: well-being, relationship, being with people that we care about. Even like we start to just focus on grinding and getting things done. And I think, and look, all of us, I'm sure have done some version of this. I know I'm guilty of it. I learned all these lessons by doing the things that didn't work first. So I think it's something that from experience we learn what doesn't work. But I think it's important to take a look at what parts of it didn't work. I know for me and a lot of the work that I've done around it for myself, what didn't work was that my why was all about survival. It was just about, the surviving the next market churn, surviving the next, budgets being slashed at client organizations. It was always about survival, survival, survival. And it became something that, well, survival became the mindset. And there is no point in that that's actually sustainable or scalable in terms of the experience I wanted to have of my working life or my life, outside of work.
I think that's brilliant that, survival becomes the mindset because, I just it's endless that I hear people say, like, I literally don't have time for that. Like, I actually have to I have kids, I have this, I have that, we're about to do a launch, we're starting a new product, whatever it is, but everything else becomes something that you have to do in order to, like, make it or get by. Yeah, really interesting.
So how will we so I think this is a big unlock and probably one of the myths of well-being then, like I can, you know, do it without a why, or or there's a finite approach when really we should have more of an infinite big why. My temptation right now is to say, okay, well, hang on, how do I know what my why is? And that question is too big. So why do mental wellness?
I don't know if it's too big. I mean, I think the answer to the question is choice. I don't think there is a right answer. The question you're asking sort of implies I've got to discover the right answer, the accurate answer. What I'm suggesting is that the goal is to choose a why that is sufficient to your own goal. Might be a different answer for you than for me and for Brittany. So I think the opportunity there is to make it a choice, and that doesn't have to take a lot of time. It can be something that's done instantaneously, but it's something that has to mean something important to the person. But look, but the problem with this is that we're talking about this aspect of it, but what people would do with this, and this is what everybody, I think most of us struggle with, and not everybody, most of us struggle with, is that we choose a why, and we choose all the things in our lives that we want to. We sort of stack our plate full of all the things we want, and then we're victimized by this stack that we've created. All this is manufactured, right? I mean, we're just doing all the things we've chosen to do. We manufactured this stack of things to do, and now we're victimized by having to do them. And so this is where the mindset is so important, because it doesn't matter how much I meditate or exercise or do all the things that are good for me if I'm victimized by the things that I've chosen to do. And so you've got to choose your why and then choose all the things you stack in there to fulfill upon that why as well. And this choice has to be made every day. This is an active process. None of this is a light switch that you flip on and just happens automatically. It has to be something that's chosen and re-empowered every single day.
That's huge. So let's say I take an example of my why is to be energetic and present with my children.
Nice.
So I choose it, I empower it. I love the idea of, hey, it doesn't have to be a right, wrong, almighty, alpha and omega kind of thing. It's just a,
Yeah.
hey, my why right now is to go snowboarding with my kids with knees that work and muscles that still want to move, to be able to do more than 10 runs, to I can see that. Now for me the next challenge feels like, okay, well, how is meditation in service to that? Because to be energetic and present with my children does feel like another thing that I need to do. Like, okay, I have to plan trips. I have to exercise, get some conditioning done. So help me see where that I love what you described around the victimization around to-dos, the, slotting things in as a right and wrong way to do things. So walk me through, if I was to choose my why as energetic and present with my children, what's the next step?
Well, it's interesting because your language still points to having to. You even said it. Now I have to go plan the trip. I have to go buy the equipment. You know, I have to get through 10 runs or a minimum of 10 runs a day. So there's still that this is a thing I got to go do. So it's energetic and present, and maybe you're also enjoying it, having fun doing it, so that these things become things you get to do. Get to go snowboarding with your kids and watch them laugh and listen to them play and pick them up when they fall and actually have fun doing all of that. So it's not just energetic and present so I can get through the day with them on the slopes and having to go do all that stuff, is that you get to. And this is that mindset piece. So that's the piece that I would say is the next step. It's taking that into, what do I want?
Mm.
Not how do I get there? How do I get through it? But what do I actually want? And then this is where the creative part gets started, because you've chosen a why like that, a why that's that big and that sort of intimately connected to who you are as a father, right? And as a person, as a human being. Now, I mean, nothing's going to get in your way if you've really chosen it. And now you start to get creative. You can start to find a couple of hours in a day. Oh, let's go take a couple of runs, right? You start to get up in the morning and stretch maybe because you know that if I don't do that, then by the time Saturday comes around, when it's time to go snowboarding, I'm going to be sore. So I'm gonna get up and stretch every morning so that doesn't happen then, right? Then I start thinking about maybe taking a lesson or two so that I can keep up with them. So we
Mm,
start to get creative, innovative because we care. We care about something
mm,
that's beyond getting through 10 runs and surviving that day or surviving another snowboard season. It's about the relationship that you're actually doing this for.
yeah, and that does unlink. It definitely is a deconstructs it for me a little bit because now I move from, well, if Tim Cook runs 6 miles before 4 o'clock in the morning, that's something I have to do because I want to be great. And or this person does handstand meditation for 7 minutes before every meal. It does those are two such very, very different categories that it would be interesting to explore, that wellness can actually be in service to pleasure and enjoyment and the quality of life versus if I don't do this, something is going to be deteriorating or I am going to fall behind. And an example I will use is I have this hang up with reading, and it's just happening for me right now, is thinking, okay, well, I need to exercise the muscle of reading and I have to ingest what great minds are putting out there as a I I I I like it and I need it and I there's a part of me that wants that. But there's also a part of me that can just say, "Hey, man, I want to enjoy being a great reader and someone who peruses what people are putting out there." Just because I might not be great at it, and I might be lazy, or I might not be making time for it, but I feel a relief when I say, "Hang on, I get to practice reading, reading maybe
Yeah.
more and more and more to some sort of relevant limit." And I practice that wellness versus, all the great people I know read 5 books a week, and it's like now I have to practice to get there as a
Right.
path to wellness.
Right. But that's where wellness becomes a doing. In fact, in your speaking, it even became something that's being done under threat. Do it or else, right? I'll fall behind or else something will happen to me that's adverse. And that is not sustainable because it only is going to work until we stop being scared. And
Welcome to the life of the CTO, man. Everything
well, I
under
think it's
duress.
welcome to the life of a lot of people out there, unfortunately, who are in any kind of conversation about well-being. In fact, if you look at the New York Times bestseller list, most of those books are diet books about how to take care of yourself without any effort, any thought, just passively, become suddenly healthy. And because I think it's become something that people are afraid that if they don't do, they'll lose something. And so they're doing it under threat or they're doing it under fear of falling behind or some version
Mm,
of that sells a lot of
mm,
books. But it's all about getting it quick. None of it's about life. Very little of it's about lifestyle change and about choosing it because there's something in it that you want. Most of it's about how to get it without wanting it, how to get it without having to do anything hard or uncomfortable to get it.
mm.
And I think that's where you sell a lot of books, but you also have people in cycles that don't get them what they want over and over and over.
Yes, and I will stop at this point, Brett. Thank you. I got what I needed.
Good. I'm
You're
so glad
welcome
that we did
to.
that for you. I mean, not to beat this one note, but what I really keep hearing in both of your speaking is, or the absence of it in your speaking, is that there is an acknowledgement of self-importance to be able to have this conversation with yourself, even be listening to this podcast and want to think about it after this podcast, right? Because what I see so often is, well, yeah, that sounds nice and that sounds great, but I'm not going to go say that to my CEO why I need to go snowboard this weekend instead of finish this launch, right? Or, well, that's fantastic, but there's nobody else to do this work. So there's something that I assert occurs for humans. And if we're, this is called the CTOs podcast. So we'll talk to the CTOs in the world that has one believe, well, all that's well and fine, but my life doesn't work that way. Well, that's all well and good, but I don't have time to take care of myself. I know that it's important. I know I'm important, but I don't have time for that. So, what would be the thing we would offer folks from that vantage point that's like, this sounds amazing, and you try living my life and see if you can do it that way?
Absolutely. So yeah, Brittany. So it occurs as impossible, right? Our schedules, well, mostly our schedules, and all the things we have to do seem to get in the way. And from the point of view of ego, it is impossible. But you're talking about, you keep bringing back this concept of self worth into this conversation, right? And you're pointing back to sort of that root, and we had to sort of extricate self worth from ego. And so, I'm worth taking care of, period. And I also want to be successful. And so, how do these two things interact? Question, in a healthy way. How do I actually own my worth and not have it sort of sidelined because I got to get stuff done. I got to, I can't miss this launch. I can't miss that. You don't know my life. Those
Mm.
versions of reasons why I can't. And this is loud and this is practice, and it's a long practiced habit that's become a lifestyle.
Yeah.
We think about it in that respect. This is a mindset that I can't because I have to get all this stuff done.
Hmm.
Self worth doesn't get in the way of that. Snowboarding with your son doesn't get in the way in the way of that. These two things, once they are owned as a lifestyle and as a mindset, both of them, they find ways to creatively be connected. They
Hmm.
find ways to interact and be interdependent, in fact, so that, yeah, I'm going to be successful, but I'm not going to be able to be successful unless I also am able to own my self worth.
Yeah. And I think that's the bridge because what we absolutely know about people is you are your best when your cup is filled, right? That's when you have the most sense of self, the most creativity, the most patience to be with crap that annoys you. So, what we're really saying is that success as the thing we're going towards that would have us put down self worth is a dead end because we can only get to it's that same limiting conversation, right? We can only get so much success if we're not taking care of ourselves. And in order to live in both worlds, which is taking care of ourselves and being successful, there's an ownership of who I am matters. And my level of success is available to me because of how well I'm taking care of myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I would even say that at the level of the C-suite, it occurs like a responsibility to take good care of yourself. Like it actually feels incredibly irresponsible to put yourself so much on the back burner for other things when you're in charge of a lot of people and when you have a lot riding on it and a whole organization is looking at you at creating something. Uh, And that's usually the time where people want to put themselves on the back burner.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's a really uncomfortable thing to kind of own that you have to take care of yourself in order to be the successful person that you can be. It's yeah.
Yeah. But it boils down to that very simple fact, though. I mean, there is a ceiling. You talked about it as a dead end. I think about it as a ceiling. There's a ceiling of what I can produce if I'm not taking care of myself,
Right.
because this will break down at some point, right? I mean, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, all those things. They'll break down at some point. So there's a ceiling of what I can produce if I ignore this too often, too long. When I realized that taking care of me and that I matter enough to take care of, when I realized that is interdependent with my success, that's where the lifestyle comes from.
Mm.
I think you're pointing to sort of the how, right? Brittany is choosing these two things as interdependent. Interdependent just means I'm not going to get there. My success isn't going to get there without my self worth. My self worth isn't going to necessarily get there alone without my success in doing something with it. And so this interdependence, I think, is the key to shifting the mindset and the lifestyle.
Yeah, totally. And it makes me think about all the times where we hear people who move through like a ladder, whether it's going from a software engineer to a director of engineering to head of engineering to CTO, whatever sort of way that your industry works, there's such a narrative and conversation that's like, as I go further, I need to work harder. And as I work harder, there's less time for me. But based on this conversation, what we're really saying is as you move up the ladder, it becomes more imperative that you take better care of yourself because you are being stretched further and further than you've ever been stretched before, which makes sense that if we don't train people in that, you get to that level of responsibility and you have more stress than you've ever had before. And you start having migraines and all these things because you haven't been living in the more I do and the more that expected of me, the better I need to take care of myself.
Yeah, and
Yes.
what I really love about that is that's like catnip for the CTO because, we could have a why that says solve I want to provide value in the C-suite at my most adult resourceful self. I want to do it in a way that creates more possibility and opportunity for me. I don't know where that ranks on the why mark, but as a why, one could then say, listen, well, that is taking care of yourself. That is being fresh, open, and ready. When you're in the C suite, we all know what a scarcity mindset looks like from a
Mhm.
CTO that's burned out and is at the butt of all decisions. So, getting ahead, being a first class citizen, if we're specifically talking about professional wise, I can definitely see how those would be really obvious whys to pursue, and therefore leads then into what you said, Britt, around, well, in order to do that, to be that success, there is the taking care of self, because maybe you can document what happens when maybe you can document cases and situations where you've haven't done lived up to your because you haven't been taking care of yourself, so you are exhausted or whatever when a certain decision is made or when a certain person is hired or when a certain strategy is adopted.
I think it feels as if one of the underlying myths that are ever present in at least Western culture professionalism is the like, you need to work as hard as you can and do everything that you need to do, and then you can take care of yourself. Like, it's this thing, right? Like, work really hard, which feels like a direct opposition to leadership, which is, I think about this, I don't know why. Maybe it's because I really love salads, but I'm thinking about this in terms of lettuce. When I go to the grocery store, I am really critical about which lettuce I choose to put in my cart. I'm not going to choose a lettuce that looks like a little brown or a little wilted or that many people have touched. I'm going to choose the best looking lettuce. So, and the same would go for a leader I would follow. If somebody looks tired and stressed out and that they're not eating or taking care of themselves, I'm going to lose trust for that leader and feel not as safe inside of their hands. Right? So it's this really interesting dichotomy that we play of I'm going to work myself to not be a good lettuce so that I look good to you, but that doesn't really work. Not good lettuce.
I like the lettuce analogy. Look, I think you're hitting on something important there. Is that there's a sort of a flip side to the coin of working hard, grinding, is that when I work hard and grind and I don't take care of my well-being, I can't be as effective with all that work that I'm doing. I'm not as innovative. I'm not as creative. I don't catch as many things. I'm not seeing options and alternative routes. I'm not listening to disruptors as much as I otherwise would because I'm just in survival mode. And in survival mode, you can't be creative at that level. So as to your point, Britt, as a C-suite executive, there's a responsibility to be taking care of myself sufficient to being able to operate at that level, to be able to be dynamic and agile and resilient, anti-fragile, actually be able to bounce back from things better than I ever was as a result of those breakdowns. These are responsibilities at that level. And so yes, I like thinking about it like that. But the danger is that if it becomes a should or a have to, it starts to pollute the
Mm,
why.
yeah.
Right. So again, back to the lifestyle point is that, this has to be something somebody wants, well-being, in other words, has to be something that somebody wants that includes work, not just because of work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's not going to be sustainable because as soon as work gets too big, I'm gonna back this down because work was the point in the first place.
Yeah.
That's basically what we're talking about. If well-being and taking care of myself is the point, then when work starts to rise, to your point, I'm also going to rise, accelerate, or increase my well-being commensurate with what's being expected of me. And that's why we have to put that well-being as a mindset and lifestyle choice, not as a thing to do to get stuff done better. And I think that's the danger of thinking of it in that context.
Yeah. I think it's a great reflection of how easily we become just like a part of a system that we're operating in, right? Which is not even realizing, oh, I'm in a mindset of here are all the ways that it works. So I have to do something this way, which means this is how it has to go, and so on and so forth. That um the call forth for leaders in the world is to pause and ask themselves, what am I operating inside of? And is this mindset serving my commitments and serving the projects and serving how I want my life to go? Or is it inside of a narrative or myth that has me only looking to survive or only just getting by or what have you?
Yes, absolutely. You talk about it as a myth. The other part of it that's a myth is that somehow it's the thing that's in the way of it is time. I think most people talk about, well, I'm too busy. I don't have time to take care of myself. I don't have time to shop for that salad and I just got to order a burger. There's a version of this that gets lopped off because we don't have time.
Yeah.
The thing is that when you create something as a lifestyle, time stops being the issue. Having time to do it isn't a conversation you're in. It's about when, not if.
Mhm.
So I'll fit it in. I'll have to reschedule and I'll have to, if we're talking about meditation or time with family or reading, whatever the thing is that serves your well being or things that serve your well being, finding time to fit it in stops being the problem. It becomes a challenge, maybe, but
Mhm.
it stops being a problem and you don't negotiate with it as though it's expendable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good example, and it makes me think about, eating, sleeping, taking care of our kids. You're not like, "Well, this week there's not really time for that, so I'm just gonna not do it this time around, and, I'll catch the kids next week with some salad."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
If you're it's like with having a car, you have to change the oil. You might be in a rush, you might have a long trip, but if it's time to change the oil and you don't, well, you're it's going to slow you down even more. You have to stop and change the oil so that you can continue on the journey effectively and get there
mm.
ultimately.
Yeah, and I think it speaks a lot to the situation that CTOs get themselves into, where the value proposition or the identity that you bring to the company is one of 24/7 problem solving or unblocking or being on call to solve another problem. And I think we start wrapping who we are and why they hired us into that one identity that gets us into a place where if we aren't available, then we're not delivering on the value we promised or the reason we got hired. And therefore, I could lose my job and therefore it could impact my household income. So I have no choice but to be, like you said, at the victim of the to dos and
Yeah.
somehow try and fit the mental health stuff, sprinkle it in there. And I think to many people it means waking up super duper early to just kind of squeeze it in before the family wakes up. And I tried that for 2 or 3 years where I woke up at 4 o'clock every morning and I was waking myself up to death. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
I
I,
think that's
I
good.
I have some sorry, I have some real empathy right now for, the people listening to this who are like at effect, I would say. What is it? At cause, at effect. The
Mhm.
people who feel like, you know what, I'm in a situation where I actually don't get to do what Mark suggested, where it's like lifestyle first. And let me just throw another thing in there. I worked with people who would say, listen, when it's 5 o'clock, I'm done. Or I'm not available over weekends. And I'm talking about VP level people. And It was incredibly difficult to work with those people.
So what you're talking about is a bit of a zero sum game, though. It's me or nobody, right? And look, if you're a CTO, a VP, if you're somebody who's a bottleneck for support or for information or for deliverable, I think the solution there is again, from thinking about well-being as a lifestyle and a mindset. It's not about, well, I'm out of here at 5. Bye. It's also not about getting up at 4 o'clock necessarily, unless that works for you. But it's about creating redundancy, perhaps. And these are just examples. It's about training. If I can't be on call because I'm going home at 5, have somebody else be on call. It's about creating support structures and systems and training the people around me sufficient to, I don't have to be the one person that's available or
Yes,
nobody is.
yes,
And this is
yes.
where ego starts to get, like, going back to
Oh,
the ego conversation. If I come into this role or any role thinking, well, they hired me because I work 24/7 and burn myself down to a nub. If I come in thinking that, or if I've sold that, then my ego is going to probably try to evidence that.
yeah.
Uh, Problem is that for any organization is going to be not sustainable or scalable, because as a bottleneck, as soon as I go down for any reason whatsoever, well, it goes down. That line that I created that goes straight for me and nobody else. So I have to make sure that I'm creating enough other people around me who can do what I do, some version of what I can do, so that when I'm not available for any reason, there is somebody who is available. And that's going to mean that my ego is going to have to be superseded by this mindset of well-being, including the well-being of the organization. Look, we're talking about well-being, like about the physical body and maybe the emotional and spiritual body. We're also talking here, I think, on some level about the well-being of an organization that we're part of the leadership
Mm,
team.
mm,
That's an ecosystem as well
yeah.
that we are sacrificing and violating when we aren't taking care of ourselves or taking care of it in case we go down for whatever. So I think this is, we start getting into, bench depth. We start getting into redundancies, structures and systems for contingencies. All these things are part of an executive's plan. They
You
need to
are
be. If they
using
aren't,
you're using all my favorite words right now. It's driving me nuts.
I feel like I should apologize.
No, you should apologize because you're making me super energetic. The kids aren't gonna know what hit them tonight.
They're part that those are all parts of well-being. Ours as well. Think about it. If I'm the CTO and I create those things sufficiently, I'm taking care of the well-being of the organization,
Well,
and I'm taking care of my well-being, and I can go snowboarding with my son. But this has to be done from a mindset. It can't be like, oh, Mark said go do these things, 7 things, and then everything's gonna be
well,
fine.
and
That's
the
not the yeah.
and what I love about what you're saying is that the converse is true. Therefore, if you are not being governed by the why, you are able to fill up all your time slots, and you are doing too much, and you are everywhere, and you are actively building a system that is dependent on you, and you become the bottleneck, and then that feeds discontent and unhappiness, and then you're out anyway, and then you're finding another job. So I really think that the gold for me in this conversation is that the wellness or the mental health really is a function of my why, which is a larger question. It has an infinite vibe to it, or a lifetime vibe. It isn't a reaction against something. It isn't finite. And I think for a lot of people listening to this, like, what is that why you know, that you are gonna massage or sort of activate your lifestyle by,
Yep.
Yeah.
Choose. Ultimately, just
or
choose.
choose.
Yeah.
Choose, yes.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I'd put in before we wrap up is honoring the narrative or context that a lot of CTOs are sitting inside of, which is what you spoke about, Etienne, which is like, hey, you are in charge of this whole department that we know nothing about. So you have to be available and you have to, if something happens, it has to be fixable immediately, right? Like there's not a lot of other departments where that level of urgency. So perhaps part of what we're going to see culturally in the next few years in this industry, as a hopefully in terms of a good thing would be How do folks start really reconciling that when your role, the myth of your role over years and years has been you have to be available, you're the one, you have to be urgent to fix and solve it. Learning how to stand up for that might not be true. Like, we actually have to have some patience. And it's really inside of a bigger cultural context of all of us feel that way about tech. The moment our computer doesn't work, it is an emergency and we feel lost and we're like, what is happening? So there's some training of us as humans to also have more patience with this thing we've decided has to work perfectly all the time, every time.
Mm,
So I
mm,
think that that's part of
mm.
the challenge here that we have to honor is that a lot of you are inside of that, and it's gonna take some learning and some learning for all of us to kinda get over that sense that it has to be perfect all the time.
So good.
Well, thanks, Mark, for joining us again and for bringing such brilliance to the conversation. And Etienne, thanks for just joining.
Wow. Wow.
Thanks, Britt. It's great to be here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
both. Yeah.
Cheers.